All right, this is going to be the video for the chess pawn assignment. What's different about this model is the way that we create the 3D geometry here. So what we've done before is we've used extrude. So the extrude tool takes a 2D boundary and creates that third dimension by extruding that 2D boundary along a linear axis. So it's one direction. Revolve, what Revolve is going to do is it's going to take that 2D boundary and create the 3D by rotating it about an axis. So it's really good for round parts, parts that are symmetrical about a center line. And so if we think about this pawn, we have an axis that goes right down the center of this entire piece. And when we see things like that, we should be thinking about using, the revolve. So if we have features like this, we can use the revolve. So if we look at the sketch that we have here, if we have imagine a line going all the way through, dividing this 2D image in half, we can see that the two sides it's a mirror image of each other. And that's how we're going to actually sketch this out. We'll essentially divide this in two, and we're only going to sketch one side, because when we revolve it, when we create the 3D geometry, the other side is going to be created through that method. So we don't want to sketch both sides. We only want to sketch one side because the other side is going to be created with that revolve. So in our sketch, we'll only be sketching half of this. So some of these values are going to be divided in half. So we'll look at this 1 inch, for instance. We're going to start the sketch in the middle and go over to the side. So that's only going to be dimensioned half of whatever this value is. And we'll be able to put that into NX in a way that keeps the history of the part. So we don't want to put in just half an inch. We actually want to put in 1 divided by 2, since 1 inch is what we're told on the drawing. And that's going to be like the final dimension that we're looking for is 1 inch. It's just that the sketch is dividing that by 2 because it'll double to create the final part. So in NX, we'll start a new model. This is in inches. We can name this pawn or chess pawn, and we're going to save it to the desktop. We'll start with a sketch. We'll sketch on the right plane. And just starting off, so I'm just going to draw this bottom line here. So I'm just going to start off by drawing this bottom line, and then I'll start to sort of piece this whole thing together based off of the dimensions that I have here. What I'll probably do is I'll do this bottom part and then this top part. I'll save this radius probably till the end. But don't be surprised if we kind of move around on this one. But I am going to start with just a single line here so we can see how our approach is going to be for the rest of the model, and also so that we can get the scale down. This one is a little bit weird if we just kind of try to do the shape and then add dimensions. It can get a little messy. So we're just gonna draw one line, dimension that, and then we will move on with the rest of our part. All right, so to start the sketch out, I'm just gonna draw one line. This will be the bottom line, that 1 inch diameter. But remember, we only want to draw half of it. So I'll draw a line. I'll make sure I start at the origin point. So there's my one line. When I dimension this, I don't want to just say 0.5 inches. Because if I just say 0.5 inches, then I'm losing the reason why I'm doing this in the first place. So a better way to do this is to actually do the math through NX. So NX is a powerful tool. It is we can use it as a calculator. We can use it to make some complicated equations. And we'll sort of do that a little bit later on in future assignments. But with this 1 inch divided by 2, yes, that's half an inch. It's 0.5. But I don't want to just type in 0.5, because if I do, and this value changes later on, this value here, this 1 inch changes later on, then we sort of lost what the half inch was even doing in the first place, right? A better method is, instead of saying half inch, we're going to say equals 1 divided by 2. And yes, it's still half an inch, but if I go to change this value, it's kept it as 1 divided by 2. So let's say that the diameter changed to 1.5. Well, we can just change that to 1.5, and it's updated the actual line length, keeping track of what the true value is actually going to be. So when we have values that we're going to divide in half because of the way that we're actually modeling it, then we're going to keep track of those values by doing this method here. So this will be 1 divided by 2. And I'm sort of just going to sketch this out. I'll start down here with this area. Now we do have this detailed view. This detailed view is essentially just this circle blown up larger. So this is a larger scale, so we can actually, it's easier to see what these values are defining. I'll do this down here, and then I'll work on this top area, and then the last thing I'll do is this arc, this radius right here. So you'll see me sort of skip around a little bit. This right here will actually input as a circle. So we'll actually make a circle here, and then we'll also have this sort of slot area as well. And because we're using the revolve for this, we're going to have to add in a center line. So even though we have this vertical axis from the origin that technically is the center of our part, we need to define 2D boundary. Remember, we need an actual defined 2D boundary. So we have to have a line that goes through the center here. So we'll have half of this model with a line going down the center. So everything is going to be half of what you see here. When I do the circle, I'm actually going to do an actual circle. So we'll have this whole 0.625 inch diameter. But what I'll do later on is we'll actually go and trim the excess material, excess lines, curves, things that we don't need, that is just easier to sketch that way, and then go back and trim off what we don't need. So back in NX, I'll go, instead of a line, I'll go to my profile tool and continue to create this sketch. When I do place the circle, I want to make sure that the arc center is aligned to this vertical axis. So I've selected the circle tool, and I'll make sure this first point is on the vertical axis. This slot here doesn't really matter. So like the fact that we've gone beyond this vertical line doesn't matter. All these curves here are going to be trimmed off. So this is totally fine. We'll just add in the dimensions that we have, and then we'll continue on. the length, or I guess the width of this area here is defined as this 0.60, but this is from one side to the other. This dimension crosses this vertical line that we have, the center line. So just like the 1 inch, we're going to divide this by 2. But when I put in the value, I'm not going to say 0.3, I'll say 0.6 divided by 2. So from our vertical line to the end of our half slot, I'll say equals 0.6 divided by 2. So this arc here starts at this endpoint of this line, and it's going to end on this bottom line of the slot that we have. It's going to be 0.085 inches from the edge. It's got a radius of 1.7. So we'll start our curve here. We'll end on this line, give it a radius of 1.7, and put in this distance here. So with the curve, or with the arc tool, your first click is going to be the start point of the arc. Second will be the end point, and then you can define the radius. So here, our start point will be end point of that line. We'll make sure that it ends on this line, and we'll give it a radius of 1.7. And then we can give this distance here. You want to make sure that we pick up the point of the arc. And we'll make sure we select that horizontal distance. Now I'll create a line starting from the origin. And I'm just going to go all the way through to the top. Now when we do the trim tool, what will probably happen here is when we delete this line here, or this part of the line here, and then this half circle, this 2-inch dimension is actually going to default down to the end or the bottom of the circle. And so we might get an error about our relations. And that's just, we'll just have to delete that dimension and then add in the 2-inch the way it's supposed to be. You might also, depending on how you've defined the dimension locations here, you might see a dimension get deleted. So if when you're done with this, if it still says partially defined, make sure that you have your 0.125 inch dimension, this dimension, or this dimension here. Occasionally, just depending on how you've defined this, it could get deleted once you trim off the excess lines. So if you trim off a line that is being used to define one of these distances, then that's when some of the errors can pop up. So just be aware of that. So we will go to our trim tool, and we're going to trim off. So this line went beyond this 2-inch point. So I will trim off that line. I'll trim that curve, the left side of our circle. And you'll see that it did default down to this 1.375 value. And we're going to trim off all of these curves that are inside our 2D boundary. Like this curve, that curve, that curve. And you'll see that once you have trimmed off those curves, you should see this 2D boundary turn that light shade of blue. We talked about this last time about that's a good indication that you now have a defined 2D boundary. So if I close out of this, the trim tool, it says I have conflicting persistent relations. That's because this value, or this dimension that I did not add, needs to be deleted. And I will define this line as 2 inches. If yours might look like something like this, make sure that you have the everything dimensioned the way that we had it before. Maybe one of your dimensions got deleted. Okay, so double check on that. Now, once this is fully defined, we'll go ahead and say finish. Now we have our defined 2D boundary. So to create the 3D model, we're not going to go to extrude. Extrude would just create the 3D object by extruding this 2D shape along this axis, along this x-axis. That's not what we want. We want to revolve it about an axis. We want to revolve it around an axis, not extrude along the axis. So next to extrude, we have revolve. And so we'll go to revolve. It's going to ask us to select curves. We'll select our sketch. If you already had the sketch selected, that would be selected already. And then we have axis. So we have specify vector and specify point. So a couple things about this, and you'll see this pop up in a few other things as well, like pattern feature when we are patterning a feature in a circular pattern. You'll see this pop up as well. So specify vector and specify point. If I click on specify vector, you'll see these purple arrows pop up. So this is going to be the direction of the vector that we want to rotate around. So for us, we want to choose the z-axis. So if we select the y-axis, then it would be rotating, taking our sketch and rotating it for this way. This would be the x-axis, right? It'd be rotating it this way. The z-axis is going to be rotating it this way. This is what we want. Now we don't have to select these arrows. I'll show you the way of selecting the arrows. Sometimes that does make sense to do. Not always. Typically there is a much easier way to do it. And the easiest way has to do with this line here. But let's look at the arrows first. I'll just show you how to do the arrows and then I'll show you the easier method. So specify vector, I can say, hey, I want to rotate around the z-axis. Then it's going to ask for a point. It's going to say, okay, where's the point of rotation? So for us, this would just be this point here, just somewhere along the line that is going to be the line of our sketch that's going to be rotated around. So that would just be, this origin point here for us of our sketch. And there is our revolve, okay? So there's an easier method here though. And the easiest method is to just select the line. So we can select the line or an axis. If we select a line or an axis, the vector and the point get selected automatically. So I have my curve selected. I'll go to specify vector. I'm not going to select one of the purple arrows. I'm just going to select the line that is going to be the center of rotation. So we're going to be rotating about this line. So I'll just select that line and the vector and the point are automatically selected. With the revolve, we can say, or we can have it not rotate fully round, all right? So we could change this value here. Maybe we only needed it to revolve a certain degree, not 360. But if we did need it to be a complete revolve, then yeah, we do want to have this angle be 360 degrees. And so yes, ours will be 360. We'll say okay. And there is our chess pawn piece. So make sure that you save this before you submit it to the Dropbox on Canvas.